Welcome back to the table. Today, Emily and I have played this game a few times. We're ready to tell you all about it. This is Copan Dying City. This is from Holy Grail Games. It's on crowdfunding right now. We've played it twice.
A couple times, yep.
I've played it 3 times now at various player counts. And we're going to try to tackle this game to tell you what it's like, but mainly some of our big takeaways from the game.
What makes it unique?
What makes it unique, because if you want to see the game played thoroughly and have a good, thorough explanation of how it's played, they've actually got a couple good playthroughs on their own channel that play through the whole game and kind of explain it as they go. They even have a setup and explanation thing. So go check those out if you want that. We will touch on a little bit of that, but we're going to give you kind of a 30,000 feet perspective of that before we get going. What you see here in front of us is the game in its final form after a 3-player game.
Yes.
But the game is a point salad game that's broken up into a lot of different sections of the board that you'd expect in a lot of Euros. Mm-hmm. You've got this section over here, which is an area you can go to, and it kind of represents the diplomatic connections to other cities. But it largely, from a game standpoint, is an achievement-based thing. You want to get as much presence there as possible at the 6 different locations to get as many points as you can. You've got a river up here, which is where you're going to be able to sort of refresh the tiles that you use in the game. You can run out of those, and you need to go there to get those tiles. Not to mention some extensions that allow you to hold more and more resources.
Then you also have the player board, so you're taking new player cards, which are going to give you instant abilities, ongoing abilities, or endgame points as well. So you can take as many of those as you have spots at the top. And then at the bottom, there's the altar, which is kind of giving you a hodgepodge of different things you can get, and are also going to move you up the different various tracks in the middle, which are all going to be different kinds of endgame points, which can range from negative to severely positive, depending on where you end up in the end. And then the last one is going to be the different cards. So it's kind of like a set collection. And you can use that to get your mask pieces by either turning in sets that are the same or different types.
Yeah, these are all effectively different areas that have not too much to do with one another. Some of them are interconnected. Like you mentioned, the altars down here kind of spread out and allow you to do actions in all the various places. And then some of the cards here and some of the bonus actions here
a little bit of
will let you kind of shoot over and do another action or another action, but mostly it's kind of combo central.
Yes.
And effectively you're able to link and get as much out of your turn as possible. And I want to point out too, the mask. At the beginning of the game, you start out with this mask board that has none of the jade mask pieces on it. You have them all beside it. And then as you do collect these glyphs or these hieroglyphs, you do trade those in at a certain point as kind of a free action after you've collected a lot of them to put a bunch of masks pieces on here, triggering a ton of bonuses.
Yes.
And that is one of the interesting things about the game is some of your turns can be very quick, very straightforward. I'm going to do this. It lets me go up this and take this.
Yep.
The end. On the other hand, some of your turns can be, I'm going to do this. Oh, and then I'm going to use my free action to place this. Oh, and I've got 6 different glyphs. So that lets me place
4 pieces.
4 mask pieces, which lets you get more resources and maybe take other actions and get really set you up for more.
It just can keep going.
And it can really spill into a lot of big turns. Speaking of the turns, here's effectively what you do on your turn. At the beginning of your turn, you're going to, it's called the court phase. You're going to have these tiles right here in your hand. Everyone starts with 4. Mm-hmm. And you're going to place one out into this area in these 4 sectors of this sort of pyramid or ziggurat. And when you place one down, you're going to do a number of things. You might cover up a couple bonuses to get more resources. You might cover up something that's going to cause an event. Events we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. But after you do that, you're going to effectively claim resources and add those to your resource board here. Like we said, you only start with one section that goes up to 4, so your resources are capped at 4, and there are 4 different ones. But then you can get extensions that allow you to hold many, many more. The big takeaway here from this portion of the game is that resources deplete. The whole idea of this dying city is things are kind of getting worse and worse. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of the first way you can feel that, because as you trigger the taking of resources, if I played this blue tile here, one of the things that's going to happen is this blue track is going to have that resource deplete. Now at the beginning you can take a couple of those, but as it goes down you're going to take fewer and then all the way down to not really taking any.
Nothing. Yeah.
Not to mention, these tracks will also trigger those events, and those events are never really great for you.
They can be okay.
They can be, but generally not.
Generally, they're not great. And as events happen, they're going to keep going down these tracks, and that's the way we can trigger the end of the game, right? If any of these tracks get to the very bottom, if any two of them get to the very bottom, that'll trigger the end of the game. Or if there are no spots left to place tiles, so you can take the maximum amount of turns, and then there's no more game to play, and that'll trigger the end of the game.
Yeah, and speaking of the end of the game, there is an event card here. Now this serves a couple different purposes. One, whenever an event is triggered, you're going to roll this die, the event die, in the tower, and whatever it comes up on, you're going to look at the event card and do this corresponding action. Like we said, some of these actions can be decent. We're playing on a card here that has some decent benefits.
It's very nice to us.
But you can see 4 of them here actually make some of these resource tracks deplete further. So it's going to push the end game. It's going to make it so that you can't get as many resources. The interesting thing about this is at the beginning of the game, you can select, at least in the copy we have, 1 of 9 different cards. And they have 3 cards at the basic difficulty, then one that's ratcheted up, and then one that's very difficult. The difficult one just makes the penalties that much more vicious.
Yes.
But then the other cool thing is within each of those 3 categories, there is a short game, a medium length game, and a long game. Now those have different effects that are effectively going to kind of rein in the game or push it forward. But it's kind of cool because if you're sitting down at the table with new players, you might want to play the easier one.
And a shorter game.
But if seasoned players want the most vicious, painful experience,
a tight experience,
you can play one of the harder cards that has some really nasty penalties. Like this one has really no significant penalties.
No.
But some of the cards effectively just say, okay, everyone loses one of these things.
And it could be a big resource.
It could be a big amount of resources. It could be one of these extension tiles. And if you had resources on there, those are all going to get lost along with it. So it's a really interesting idea, and it really embraces the whole concept of the theme because you're losing resources. And as some of these events go off too, it's actually going to close
different spots around the board.
Yeah, it's crazy. Of the different areas of the board, each area has different spots. As you can see, all these spots across the bottom at the altars. Each one of these cards has a spot. You see all those. The die is going to trigger some of those closing, and you put out these little close tokens on there. Those aren't usable for the rest of the game.
For the rest of the game, no one can go there now.
As you can see right here, we've lost these 2 glyph cards, so whenever the cards refill, those never get refilled, effectively making this bottom spot a non-action.
Yes.
You're taking characters off the board, so you have fewer characters to select from. Closing some of these cities, and like we said, you want to get to as many of those cities as possible. Once they're closed, there's little to no way of getting to those cities. So you want to kind of figure out, okay, I need to do some of these things before some of these bad things happen.
There's a lot of it that goes into the timing, trying to be opportunistic of like, oh, that's a great card that came out, I really want to get that, or oh, I want to make sure I go to the city before it potentially closes because I think it's going to close pretty soon. So it's all about like, I'm trying to build up, but also, well, everything around me is crumbling down, right?
Yeah.
And depreciating over time, going exactly along with the theme, like you said.
Yeah, so the game continues like that to feel a little tighter. You're getting fewer resources. Now, on the flip side of that, you have to look around the board for opportunities to sort of supplement that. So if you can't get your resources out here in the natural way, which will absolutely happen, you're going to look around the board at other places. There may be character cards over here that just give you resources. There's a spot right here that gives you 4 wild resources. So you can kind of manage that. And it becomes like this sort of interesting balance of seeing how long you can string out your turn throughout the game without maybe going back to the river to get tiles to play during the court phase, and then maybe just relying on the action phase. Because we didn't mention this, but when you don't have a tile to play during the court phase, you have to take a tile from the bag randomly and place it face down. And when you do that, you
don't get anything.
No resources. You don't trigger any bonuses on there for resources. You don't get any adjacent resources. So you're just doing that to get it out of the way, to push the game a little bit further, and then just taking your action phase where you take this piece and use the action. Now that's the last thing that I want to kind of highlight here, is the way these action spaces work. When you take the action, which is the second phase of your game, you're going to enter one of these sections at the top of this sort of upside down triangle.
And you have to pay for that. Depending on where you're going, it's going to cost a different resource. The first time you're paying, but afterwards, on your next turn, what you could do is you could keep moving it forward. And if I move forward, I'm going to bump this person up one. They don't get anything if they're bumped, but I get whatever I chose. So I can either choose 2 points or a resource times whatever number I land on. So I'm out 1 now, so I'd get a free resource.
Yeah, it's a really cool mechanism because at any time on your turn when you're taking your action, you can leave a section and go to another space. But whenever you go to that other space, you start at the top, which almost always has a resource cost and no bonus for whatever you place on. And like we said, this is a really cool function because when you do go to a new area, you choose right then and there. Do you want bonus points when you move around this circle? Or do you want bonus resources? And early in the game, you're going to probably be tempted to go resources because you start with none. Later in the game, and also at certain spaces, I think, you may be more tempted to go with points. If it's going to be a space where you kind of rotate around and you think, I'm going to stay here as long as I can, you might be able to get, for instance, at the river, you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, a lot of points there.
Yes.
12
if
points,
you stake around the whole time and do it for 3 turns consecutively, you get quite a few points.
And the scoring in this game, what did we score in this last game with 3 players?
I think our high score was Alicia got 179. I was at 157, and
I
David
was much further
he was still in the
behind.
100. So I mean,
I'll show you right here.
Mark.
Alicia's finished mask. She got all of her jade mask pieces out here, which got her 10 points. But the other cool thing is there's these stair steps in the middle of the ziggurat. There's a few things in the game that will let you go up those steps. And these steps, again, sort of embracing that concept of like both pain and opportunity.
Yes,
If you don't go up these steps, a lot of things that you're doing in the game can actually
hurt you. They're getting you negative points.
So you could do a lot of stuff over here and get these tokens in place. But if you don't go up this track, those tokens are each going to be negative 2 points unless you go up this track. Now, when you go down to the altar and when you go to the hieroglyphs, you can actually go up these steps to the point where if you go all the way up this track instead of negative 2, they're positive 2 points at the end of the game. And she'd moved her mask up
all
to the point where
up.
Each mask piece was 2 points. So she got another, 32 points off of that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of really interesting opportunities. There's some bonus points to get if you're the first to get to the top of the ziggurat.
Yeah, there's so much to do and so many different ways to do it. It's really about figuring out what's on the board right now, what you're able to do right now, and making the most of it at which point you are in the death of this city.
Yeah, as the city's dying, score as many points at here, here, and here, and then just make sure you don't lose points over here and here.
Yep.
And hopefully you did that better than everyone else. I obviously didn't in our 3-player game. But it's a really interesting game. If you have any more questions about it at all, please ask us in the comments below. We've played it enough. We can answer anything you want. And again, if you want to look at how the game is played and get a little bit more idea of...
They have a great playthrough.
Yeah, check out their playthrough because it really thoroughly goes through and will help you there. But until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.